The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor Podcast. As always, I am your jolly northern host, Terry Cook. I'm delighted to be here, even more delighted that you have chosen to listen because we are back with a special bonus episode for you. You see, over in my membership at the Instructor Podcast Premium, I put out a call to arms and release a Zoom link for anyone to go and book a session to come and record on a topic of their choice. And the first person to jump at that opportunity was Pennie Alexander, who also invited along Jacky, Hykasten, to talk about the recent driver mobility survey and why and how driving instructors can take part and why you needed to take part. So as you're listening through, you will be able to find a link to that survey in the comments in the show description for this episode. But just before we get stuck in, I want to take a moment to point you in the direction of the Instructor Podcast website. That's www.theinstructorpodcast.com. Now, over there, you can find all the free resources we have to offer. You can find details of the online membership, which is the Instructor Podcast Premium, and you can find details of how to work with me one-to-one, whether that be across Zoom, in person, in car, or any way other you can conceive if you would like some training with me. So make sure you go and check that out. That's www.theinstructorpodcast.com. But for now, let's get stuck into the show. Pennie, thank you for joining us. What is it that you wanted to talk about today?
Thank you for having me, Terry. I would like to talk to you about the research project that's going on for driving mobility. I've brought along Jacky Hykasten from East Anglian Drivability, who will introduce herself because I can never remember her title. So, Jacky.
Thank you, Pennie. Yes, I'm Jacky Hykasten. I'm actually an occupational therapist by background, but I'm also the business development manager for East Anglian Drivability, who are part of Driving Mobility. And currently, for my sins, I've been asked by Driving Mobility to actually head up a project, which is a research project funded by Mobility Foundation, to look at the number of ADIs out there in the specialist sector of working and doing tuition with people living with disabilities. The reason we're doing this project is that for many years, anecdotally, people have talked about the fact that it's not an easy area to get into because of either the cost of putting, for example, adaptations into vehicles or finding out where they can learn about the different disabilities. And although that's been bandied around, Pennie, I think for many years by people like John Rogers and the disabled drivers sort of group, we haven't got any hard evidence on it. So recently, Mobility actually awarded us the opportunity with a grant to actually do this project. And we started off in October, just looking at it, and developed some questionnaires. Now, interesting, what we want to do, I think there's around, am I right? I'm thinking there's around 40,000 ADIs out there. I'm not an ADI as my background. And we want as many people as possible to give their views on this by filling in a short survey. The surveys, there's one for people already working with disability and tuition. And just to talk about what that area covers, because many people with disabilities don't see themselves as having disabilities. So I think we're all aware it's very, very difficult to be inclusive and look at who that actually includes. So we're looking at people maybe who are living with MS, amputations, spinal injuries, neurodiversity, deafness, anything and everything that could affect driving a conventional vehicle or indeed learning to drive in a conventional way. So as I say, the surveys are there for those, and there'll be some links, I believe, Terry, that you'll be able to give people to go on to for the surveys. There's one for those who consider they are working in this area, even if it's a mix of your usual learners and disability, and those that don't consider they are. And it's just as important we hear from people who aren't doing it, because with the surveys we've had back so far, and we've had around 300, and the balance on that is about 100 in the specialist field and around 200 not in the specialist field. But interestingly, there's well over 70% in the non-specialist field that are actually saying it is something they have considered, but there are a number of reasons that they haven't accessed it. We tried to make the surveys easy. A lot of it is tick box. So you've got some options, but there is also free text because we want to hear what your views are. You're the experts out there as ADIs. You know what your needs are if you wanted to go into this area of work. We at the assessment centres, Pennie, I work very closely with ADIs. We're looking very much at medical fitness to drive, and it is the medical condition affecting their ability to drive safely. If it is there something we can do about it? Hence, having a clinician like myself who understands the medical component. We work very much as co-assessors. And once we've assessed what somebody needs, if that be adaptations or a certain maybe sort of style of tuition or a length of tuition for, they've lost confidence maybe. Some of the older people that come to us have lost confidence. When we've assessed what they need, we know it's very difficult to find ADIs out there. Pennie, I mean, you might like to talk about our local area and sort of how we've got a lack of...
It's really difficult. I think in total around East Anglia, there's about 7 driving instructors
that we know of with adaptations.
Yeah, and it's the whole of East Anglian drivability around Essex, Suffolk, Norfolk, Lincolnshire. So there's so we go across the bottom, Colchester, right the way up to Grimsby. We have people come in for assessment. So there's a massive area that we cover and 8 instructors. So it's
and that's 8 instructors. We're talking more around adaptations, which I think is the more tangible thing that we think about when it comes to disability. But we must remember that, as I say, and there are a lot of people out in your industry doing training around neurodiversity and what have you. And we need, again, to look at what's out there, how people can access this education to upskill them in this particular sector of your industry, and making sure that it's fit for purpose, that it is, locally accessible. Again, I know as drive instructors, you seem to work all hours God sends. And it's, taking time out, particularly if you're self-employed, isn't always easy. So it's looking at all of those things. With regard to the adaptations, we've had some comments around the fact that it's not only the setup cost, but there are concerns about, well, would that affect my ability to drive and do lessons or do tuition with people who don't need adaptations? So there's a lot we're learning that people aren't sure about in this industry. But until we know what people want to know and what they need, then we can't put forward for the next phase of this. Potentially, there are 3 phases of this, which, as I say, it's a Mobility Foundation grant. We've only been given the first stage, but we're hopeful that we will be successful with a bid to get the next stage. But a lot of it hangs on to the success of this first stage, obviously, which is why I'm kind of out there saying, please, whoever you are as an ADI, fill in one of our questionnaires. Now's the opportunity for things we've talked about for years to get some hard evidence around this.
Well, let me ask you about that then. Like you say, the next stage, is that dependent on the volume of ADIs that fill in the survey, or does it depend on the response within the survey?
I think it'll be, we haven't got any set figures we haven't been given a target of numbers that we need to fill in. But obviously, the more we have, the more evidence we know, the stronger and more likely we are to go forward. I don't feel that this would be being looked at if it wasn't serious that we were going to go on further with it, because there's been a lot of money obviously ploughed into the first stage of this so that we get out as far and wide as possible to, as I say, engage with ADIs, but also the stakeholders, DVSA, the DIA, ADI, JNC, all of these people, industry leaders like yourself, influential, getting involved with you, hearing your views. There's a lot of time. It's, 9 months we're looking at dedicating to doing this research. So I don't think, going back to your question, there is a fixed number. It'll be around the quality of the information that we get as well. And I have to say, to date, we've had some really, positive sort of interaction with people and some things that, although we know the cost and the training is something, there are other things that have come up. For example, some people are concerned about it triggering, Pennie, you'll know, triggering the
Standards check.
Standards check.
Yeah.
That's something that's come up. People are unsure whether it will affect their insurance. There's all sorts of little things. We've even had people saying, I didn't even know that you could get adaptations on a vehicle for a person with loss of limb, for example, to drive. So it is raising awareness, definitely. And then it's like a lot of these research projects, what comes out of it will then shape the next stage, I think. And then Motability obviously should actually be putting out and we'll be putting in bids to actually look at, okay, we now know what the issues are and the barriers and the challenges, as well as we've already asked people to start thinking about, well, what would you do? How could we change this? So the next stage would actually be to put into place what is needed, develop that. And then the latter stage, third stage, would actually be to look at implementing it. And this is all very much about a collaborative approach, for the benefit being for the end user who, at the moment may have to travel a very long way or wait a very long time to get an ADI with the knowledge and equipment, skills, etc., to provide tuition.
So, for someone like myself, actually, who, if I'm being completely honest, I haven't got time to do this at the moment. Just, I'm running 3 businesses, it's the kind of thing. Now, it doesn't mean I won't do it in the future,
Yeah.
but for the foreseeable future, I don't see how I can accommodate this. Is it still useful that even if I know that I can't start, providing this training, providing these assessments, is it still useful if I fill in that survey?
Absolutely. And indeed, Terry, interestingly, we have had people commenting on that. I'm not ready to do it now, but I also am aware that I would have to think about this, and that's a bit of a challenge for me. I'm not sure how I would fund adaptations. I'm not sure where I would go to advertise that I'm doing this kind of work, or where I would go to learn about neurodiversity or to learn about MS, and the implications of that on driving. So absolutely, the call is for anyone and everyone. We want to hear your views on this, because then we're informed. That's what it's all about. Is having. I don't know. As I say, I'm not from your background. I've heard anecdotally. I've worked with ADIs over the last 10 years very closely, and this is. I can't believe it's a fantastic opportunity for us actually to get it documented. Everybody's views and concerns they've had, and how we can take it forward positively.
And is the end goal, in just regards to survey, just to, like you say, collect that information, but then the end goal is to get as many ADIs, coming into this sector as possible?
Well, I mean, there's certainly a shortage. I mean, it's difficult to quantify that. And again, even with the surveys, I think, we have to be mindful that if you've got an interest in this, you're more likely to fill in the survey. And so when we're asking, who of you out there are actually doing this, we don't know whether that's a true reflection of the number of people that are. There's no other way of doing it. You've got to start somewhere. But yes, as Pennie says, I mean, the problem that we have, I mean, with driving mobility, for example, East Anglian drivability, we're seeing around 1,800 people a year for assessment. That's just in, sort of, as Pennie gave the geographical area, Norfolk, Suffolk, a little bit of Cambridgeshire, Essex, etc. Now, not all of those are going to need tuition, but there are a fair number that do. And as I say, we know that there are a lot of people who don't come to us. Some people just go straight to Motability for adaptations. Those with sort of as learners, particularly, a lot of ADIs are saying, oh, I'm seeing these people, but I don't, and they're posting on forums like the DDI saying, please, can somebody give me a bit of advice? I've now got a student who's telling me that they've got this problem. Can people advise? So it is difficult to quantify the numbers at the moment. I don't believe anybody truly holds. We can look at tests. Obviously, people have gone through the test process and know how many people have actually needed an extended test for a disability. But that's just one small part of it. You've got to remember that you're also seeing people who maybe have had a stroke. So they're already a license holder, but they've now got to maybe drive with adaptations. They're not going to go through that. So those numbers aren't really known. So it's a little bit, like that. But from the experience in the field, as the term is, from those of us referring and needing to get tuition, specialist tuition, we know that there are gaps in geographical areas. For example, along the North Norfolk coast, if you're living up sort of near Sheringham or Cromer, there isn't anybody up there to do that. So there are gaps around the country, as well as the fact it can be a very long wait, or people have to travel a long way to have that lesson. So it's about being more inclusive and being able to offer, an equitable service to everybody.
Oh, I'm going to come back to Pennie in a minute, but before we move over, is there anything else you want to touch on there, Jacky?
I don't think so. As I say, it just really to say it isn't just about people, as I've said before, who are working with disability. It is about anybody who's an ADI, because we want to hear your views. So
I would say as well, excuse me interrupting, Jacky, I'd say as well PDIs, that's
yes,
training, get them to fill it in as well. It's not limited to ADIs.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So
Yeah, and I suppose the thing I would chip in as well is that even if you're listening to this and you know full well you're not going to provide this training, if by filling the form, you still may raise a point, as you touched on before, that no one else may never have considered before. So you may still be able to help just by filling that form. But no, I appreciate you along, Jack. It was a nice meeting you, and it was good hearing your thoughts on this. So big thank you for joining us today.
well, thank you very much indeed, Terry. As I say, I really do appreciate everybody's input with this to raise it, sort of far and wide. And hopefully I can come back to you and give you the results of what we found with the survey and the research, and also let you know what's happening about future stages, if you'd be happy to have me back.
You'd be more than welcome.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you both.
So, Pennie, before I dig into a few questions on that with you, maybe a bit more on the practicalities of it, is there anything you want to add on to what Jacky said there?
Yeah, so at the moment, we want, it's just simply anybody to fill in this questionnaire, whether you've got any intentions whatsoever on coming into this side of the industry, so teaching neurodiverse students, people with hearing issues, stroke. So going up to people with strokes. So we've had young people with strokes, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds. So they still haven't learnt to drive. So they're still wanting to learn to drive. So there's so many people out there. I was looking on Facebook today. There's people that are asking questions about somebody that's had a stroke with left-sided weakness. I don't think people realise just how hard it is or how difficult it is with somebody with a medical problem to become a driver or to continue driving after they've had that issue.
I think the thing is, they often can, though, can't they? I think
Oh, yes.
the human brain goes to extremes, doesn't it? So you go the extreme of, oh, well, I can fix anyone. Jump in my car, I'll sort it with no consideration around that. Or the other extreme of, well, this person's got MS, so they can't drive.
Yeah.
Is that something you come across a lot?
I think, yes. As Jacky said, there's lots of people out there that do not even realise that cars can be adapted and the way cars can be adapted. I've seen people without any legs driving. I've seen people with an arm and a leg missing. I had somebody yesterday come for an assessment, but they had a right hand amputated, who didn't think he would be able to drive again. And it was just a standard standard car with a steering spinner that has the various buttons on to do windscreens, wipers, indicators and everything. So that's the only adaptation he needed to help him steer. So, and obviously an automatic vehicle. So there's so much involved. So just not just about the adaptations as well. It's more about the the dealing with the individual, because depending on what it is that's brought them to us for an assessment, is how we deal with them and what we look for when we're helping them. So is it an adaptation that's going to help them drive, or is it something that they need that specialist tuition to help them through understanding? So there is a lot to it as an assessor, but as an instructor, it's just knowing how to help people.
Well, let me ask you about the adaptations, because I'm curious about these. Would they cause a problem with normal lessons? So, once they're on, does that impact not regular lessons, if you like?
No. So obviously you've got to have an automatic vehicle. So as long as you're teaching in an automatic. Push-pull hand controls sit at the side of the steering column, so they don't affect anything. As you pull the lever, it accelerates for you. You can't see the pedal, obviously, because it's electronic. When you're driving the car normally, you just ignore the handle, the push-pull lever, because your pedals are still there. If you've got a left foot accelerator, so you need your left leg because you haven't got right leg or your right leg doesn't work, the standard accelerator can flip up out of the way, and then the left foot accelerator flips down. So they use just the left foot accelerator, and then vice versa. So if anybody normal driving can flip the right foot accelerator down, the left foot accelerator goes up, and it's just back to a standard vehicle.
Are you allowed to? And if you are, do you ever play with those adaptations yourself when you're driving?
Of course. Yes.
Guess that. Well, do you know what? I guess that you would in terms of play with them, but I'm thinking surely that's allowed. But I wasn't sure if there's a technicality there that said.
So if your license is coded, you can only drive with those adaptations. If your license isn't coded, you can drive with those adaptations if you are able to. So we all have training on how to drive with the various ones. And then if I've got one of the automatic vehicles, I will practice with it. So, excuse me, it helps me understand what the individuals are going through and how they need to use the adaptation to help them drive.
Do you ever let learners use them? Like people that don't need them? Do you ever let them use them?
I don't, because my own car isn't adapted. So the only cars I have are with the adaptations are through East Anglia and drivability. So insurance-wise, no, I can't do that. I have been toying with the idea of getting my car adapted, but with me, it's time. I just don't have the time to do. If I could get rid of some of my learners, and my standard learners, which I am trying to do desperately, then I'm looking at getting my car adapted. So then, yeah, maybe if they wanted to have a go, I'd let them have a go as long as it's in a safe environment. At the moment, no, I can't.
And I'm not necessarily expecting numbers in an answer to this question, but what's the cost like? What's the outlay like?
So Kev Lyons, our good friend Kev, has just been pricing up to get his car done. And he's had a quote from one company to get the push-pull accelerator put in, which is quite a nice one. It's a Vagel. And that, he said, was quoted £250. That they're doing a special offer at the moment. On average, there's a couple through disability driving instructors, and they've got a couple of special offers going on, about £500, I think, to have the push-pull accelerator. Push-pull accelerator, brake, left foot accelerator, and steering ball, steering spinner. I think they're £500. But it's the other thing to think about when you're getting these adaptations, if you've got a push-pull accelerator, you cannot adjust the steering column because the steering column has to be set in one place because of the push brake. So that's one of the things that actually put me off of getting my car done, because my husband's quite a bit taller than me. So when he's in, he's always adjusting the steering wheel. So whether I end up getting a different car to my standard automatic, or whether I do get my automatic done, I haven't decided yet. So
I suppose actually that's one way it could affect driving lessons. If we've got a particularly larger or smaller student in comparison to you.
yeah, so it depends on the adjustment of the steering wheel. So in my car, because it's a Volvo XC40, so it's got a fairly wide or deep range when you change the steering wheel. But if you've got a car that's not got much of a change, so something, I don't know, I think my MG3, for example, when I had that had a very small range in the steering movability. So something like that, if you had an automatic one of those, would be quite easy to adapt to. So it depends on the vehicle that you get, your vehicle choice as well.
And then what sort of training is available for us if we got these adaptations?
This is another issue. There's not a lot of training available. So driving mobility do some training for driving instructors, but I think they only do 1 or 2 a year. So there's not much, but that's something else that I would like to bring on board, is having tuition available. Whether that will happen or not through driving mobility, I have no idea, but it's something that I am interested in doing. So if anybody wants any help, I'm more than happy to give the advice out.
That was going to be my next point, though. So even if it's not readily available where we can go and book it,
Yeah.
we're still capable of reaching out to someone and saying, could you provide me some training on this?
So what I'd suggest if somebody wanted some training because they want to get the adaptations, is go to their local driving mobility centre and just say to them that I want some training so I can just help just learn how to use the adaptations, so then I can go and teach it. I'm sure any driving mobility centre would be willing to help.
And then one thing Jacky mentioned when she was talking there, that she said she had a few people raise as a point on the survey that I'd not even crossed my mind, was about how it might affect standards check triggers.
Yeah. Yes.
What's your thoughts and experience on this?
So I think it's just same with any learner. It's just making sure that they can do everything they need to safely. As if they're doing everything they need to safely, they should be passing their test anyway. So examiners do have training for people that use adaptations. How much training, I couldn't tell you, but I know they have had, or they should have had training in those areas. But it's a case of talking to the examiners before you get there, so making sure when you're booking the test that it's all been cleared with the DVSA, that they've got these adaptations, and they need to, the driving test centre needs to be made aware. So I suggest is phoning the driving test centre the day before and saying, I've got this person coming up, they're using push-pull hand controls, so that the driving examiner is aware of what they're going to be seeing.
Oh, that makes sense. Is there anything else you want to touch on with this, Pennie?
No, I think that's everything. I'm not going to go into all the assessments and everything we do because that's a lot more complicated. But yeah, so if anybody's interested in becoming or teaching with adaptations, feel free to contact me. I'm more than happy to help anyone that wants to know.
Well, I'll include links in the show notes, the comments for this. But yeah, big thank you for being the first person to jump into this premium takeover episode that I'm doing every month going forward. So yeah, thank you for that.
No, thank you for having me.
And we'll look forward to getting you back on another episode of Pennie for Your Thoughts soon as well.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that. We need to organise that, don't we?
We do indeed. I'm not going to lie. I assumed when you booked this, that's what we were doing. What you were making the most of it, but we got something different instead, so that's completely fine. But yeah, big thank you for joining us, Dave. Enjoyed it as always.
Thank you, Terry. I've enjoyed it too.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.